My mother used to tell us stories about her grandparents, would have been my great-grandparents. And she said that they were royalty, and they had the title of Von. A title of Von in Austria or Germany meant something. Of course, that disappeared. She would say to us, "You're blue-blooded." And I remember I was in 3rd grade at the time, and we were actually learning in science about how circulation takes place in our bodies, goes to the heart and the lungs, picks up the oxygen. And of course, if you look at your body and you look at the veins as a child, you say, well, there actually is some blue blood going on there. Of course, when we slice ourselves open, we know when it bleeds, it's red. But I remember thinking, in my own childlike way, holy cow, man, we must be somebody special, this blue blood thing. That very day, after Mother told me this story, my dad came home and he went to the back bedroom, and he'd always have a habit of taking his overcoat, hanging it up, he'd take his hat, hang it on a hook. I barreled back to the bedroom before anybody else could get to Dad. And I said, "Daddy, Daddy, Mommy just told us we're all blue-blooded." And I mean, he laughed so hard. And he said, "Honey, your mama might be a blue blood, but your daddy's a mutt."
Is there a doctor in the house?
We did get a lot of attention in the 80s and the 90s.
Paging doctors Rossi, 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 and Rossi.
Still ahead, a small town solves its own healthcare crisis with some help from a family of doctors after your local news and weather.
We'll also continue the celebration with other amazing big families, including the Rossi family of 13. All but 2 of them work together in the same hospital. There are 7 Dr. Rossis in the same hospital. Paging Dr. Rossi.
Then the news media started grabbing onto it because they're like, wow, it's not just Dr. Rossi working there. Now he has his sons working there, and now his daughters are there. So it just kind of snowballed as far as like how many family members were starting to work back at the hospital.
The story about your family and the big family and lots of doctors is not really the story. The story here is that
this is state-of-the-art medicine that is being practiced here with extraordinarily intelligent and dedicated men and women who make it happen at all levels.
Well, first of all, I did not think this was possible, but he showed me. He just said, just be patient. Everything he did, he said, be patient. I have it all figured out. He was way ahead of me in everything he did. I mean, his mind was just going 24/7.
This was not fun and games for the longest time. Matter of fact, she'll say it was one of the more difficult times of her life, the first 20, 30 years doing this. Listen to Mom's story, starting from when they start out with World War II, as a young couple getting married right after the war, going to Mexico, my dad learning his trade down there, coming back to this country.
And so then he came back here and began his practice in Pekin. And while he was practicing in Pekin, the doctor had died here in Hopedale. So they said, you must go to Hopedale and look that town over. They need a doctor, they need a physician. Well, I didn't even know this was a town. I thought this was just a block. You know, when I pulled in here, what is, you know, well, this is your small town. This is little Hopedale. It was a little strange for me because being born and raised in Chicago and then coming into a little town like Hopedale. He says, okay, he says, I will open an office here. He says, I know you need this doctor, and they just begged him to stay because under any circumstances, they wanted a doctor here. I could practice here. He said, but I have a practice in Pekin. He said, and I'm going to Pekin Hospital, and I'm going to St. Francis Hospital, wherever the patient wanted to go, he let the patient go. Then he had to go make his rounds at those different hospitals. So he was going to Bloomington and Pekin and Peoria. He said, I'm spending all my time on the road traveling, and I'm not making a living. I'm not seeing the patients that I want to see. They could understand that. I said, but what would it take for you to stay here? He said, well, I'll tell you what. He said, if you could build me a hospital and I could just make my residence here and stay here in one place, he said I could practice medicine the way I want to practice it.
The town sold $75,000 in bonds door to door, and Rossi himself mortgaged his home, took a personal loan, even borrowed from his mother to get the place built.
He really lived his life out as being that mutt. In other words, I think my father really appealed to everyone. He was obviously a very, very intelligent man, very forward-thinking, very much a maverick. Here is this unbelievably little fledgling farm community of Hopedale, around that time about 500 people. Dad saw in them, I think, that same work ethic, that same immigrant spirit, that same simplicity. So why would my dad choose Hopedale? I don't think my dad really chose Hopedale. I think Hopedale chose my father, and the rest is history. We never saw really too much of our dad. He was basically totally consumed with getting that hospital built. My mother was totally consumed with raising our family.
In 1955, Hopedale Hospital had only 20 beds and 6 bassinets. The bassinets were here in the nursery.
We had very few employees, and the nurses then, especially on the weekend, when we were pharmacists, we were switchboard operator, we were hostesses. We, of course, were in charge of the emergency room and delivery.
Now, there were patients there that didn't need hospitalization. And he said, what are we going to do now? I have to figure out something. They don't need hospitalization.
When he went to the architect, he said, I want to see all your plans for, nursing homes that you have on the books. And the architect said, well, we don't have anything on our books called nursing homes.
And there were no nursing homes anywhere. There wasn't anything like, they called them old folks' homes.
He says, well, why don't you come out and we'll draw something up.
Hopedale had unintentionally developed a prototype in old age care by building what may have been the first nursing home from original plans. 1 year after, 700 new nursing homes were being planned in Illinois. Licensing authorities were bringing people to Hopedale to show them what a nursing home should look like.
He was one to promote programs that were new, programs that were in the bigger hospitals, and he saw a need for it here. He would do his best to provide that service to the community.
We also saw the need for another facility. These old people were exposed to problems that you see in a nursing home with people who had difficulty in eating. So when these healthy old folks would come in, it would be very depressing to them. It was the most depressing thing that could happen to them. So we thought, well, let's have another facility where the old folks can go that don't need hospital care or nursing care. And therefore we built Hopedale House. And that took the people who were simply old, might have had a few little minor things wrong with them that they could handle, and they took them away from the atmosphere of the sick room.
We were excluded from podiatry privileges because of ignorance, I think, primarily. And it took people like Dr. Rossi to recognize that we did have a service that was valuable to the community. Our podiatry group formed a hospital residency program, which actually was one of the very first in the country. As a result of this, other hospitals throughout the area opened up their staffs to podiatrists.
He wasn't afraid to do something that he thought would help the community or the hospital or his patients. This hospital had the first cardiac intensive care unit in downstate Illinois. This little tiny hospital, which had 50 beds, and you got St. Francis with 500 beds, and we had the first one. And the reason we had it was because the internist who was working for my dad, Dr. named Ben Lazo, said, "I want to show you something. Here's an article I got out of this journal about these intensive care units and how they save lives." And he showed him how to do it, and Dad said, "Do it tomorrow. Do it tomorrow. Set up the monitors, get the nurse dedicated to the unit, whatever." They did that overnight, just overnight. It was years, literally years before St. Francis had a cardiac care unit. And they had all the cardiologists.
Back now, 7:44, to talk of drug addiction. When most of us think of that, we think of the young person and of cocaine, because lately that's been getting the bulk of the publicity. But we too often forget about the older people addicted to drugs and alcohol. They have special problems kicking the habit. There are a few institutions in this country that help those people.
Hopedale Hall in Hopedale, Illinois is a unique treatment center for the older alcoholic.
And also for the elderly alcoholic who has a handicap, such as having suffered a stroke or a fall.
The entire complex is at the disposal of Hopedale Hall, making the center ideal for the elderly and handicapped, and it's all under the same roof. There's an acute general hospital with surgery, emergency, coronary care, radiology, and physical therapy. A modern facility on one floor.
That was just amazing how well that went, and then insurance people got involved and they pulled the plug on that, and then that was just a sad state of affairs, because we literally had people from, Hazleton and Betty Ford referring their people to the Hopedale Hospital Clinic.
It's $10 a day for a hospital room, $10, $15 for an emergency room visit. Everybody paid cash, or they gave us eggs or chickens or something. That's how doctors bartered like everybody else in little towns. Dad made house calls, drove 200 miles a day in his car, called patients. When Medicare was invented, and passed in the Johnson administration, we had to adjust that. And that was some tough times. And a lot of rural hospitals went broke because they were getting paid on that DRG system, which basically means you get paid based upon the diagnosis. You don't get paid based upon these reports that you file with the government saying how much you spent. Well, Dad, through diversification, many different things, including Hopedale Hall, expansion of assisted living, he managed to get through that, and those things like the nursing home and alcohol rehab helped keep the hospital afloat when we were getting creamed, because we didn't have the census, to the volume, to make money in the hospital anymore.
It was just unbelievable what was happening, with the hospital, and then, Dad building everything, kept building on, building on. Every time, the hospital would start making money and things were going well, he would put it into something else. He always knew he had to make something bigger and better and improve. And whether it was getting equipment for the hospital or making a larger facility or just more of a community, building the wonderful, independent living and the assisted living, his vision just never stopped.
He actually had some outreaches to the communities around Hopedale, and he would have people drive a bus there, so it was like a mobile clinic. Manitou, not having any of their own physicians, had to rely on the physicians that came on the bus to be their doctor. So people would set up appointments to go see the doctor in the bus. And I remember it pulled up in a park beside a little brick building. It would pull up there, and then cars would be parking there. They'd all get out and walk up and go into the, I think it was like an RV is what it was. Of course, it pretty quick it got to where people were going all the time to see the doctor on the bus, so they ended up building a satellite office in Manitou.
When I came here in 1980 and my dad was still active, my thought was to try to keep the place going and move it up a notch, which I think we did. And then when Matthew came back from his vascular training in 1990,
to establish a top state-of-the-art angio suite and surgery for vascular, which really made this whole institution take off at that time.
We started hiring help, training help, buying instrumentation, finding good anesthesiologists.
And then when Phil came back, Matt had laid the groundwork and it just skyrocketed. And I think the issue there was just you had very, very dedicated physicians in a hospital that had the staff and the infrastructure to support them. So it really went crazy good.
Violating every rule of economics known to medicine.
The decisions are made on the basis of what's best for patient care, period.
No hospital administration, no managed care, no HMOs here. Medicine the old-fashioned way, and it's working.
When it comes to treating patients, the sky's the limit.
They all, I know, just greatly admired their father and his plan of what Hopedale Hospital was supposed to be. And it wasn't, I will say, it isn't because they were pushed into medicine or pushed to come back here. It was their decision, each of them individually.
Dad had just gone through a coronary bypass and was really struggling to recover. He said, I need some help, you know, and I really want you to consider coming down to Hopedale. I'd really like you to help me run the place, you know, and maybe do some pediatrics. And the hospital was struggling at that time. We weren't always here at this level.
Not all the Rossies did choose medicine, but not many families can say the black sheep is an attorney.
I think they felt that I took a lot of guts to stand up in front of them and say, hey, I'm going to be a little different. I'm going to go to law school. They wished me the best, and I wasn't the least bit disappointed.
Everybody always said, well, now you have a large family, you've had the 5 brothers that went into medicine. What happened to the 6th brother? What was his problem? We said there was no problem.
Shortly after Dad, maybe the year after Dad died, or that time, and of course we went. Once he came in, then we started. If we got to do this, we got to start cutting back, because if we don't, we're going to close the doors.
When you have as the personality of my brother Al, and then you bring in myself, my wife are busy working practices, and then you bring in the next set of docs, they're all concentrated on one major factor. That is taking care of the patients, making sure they get the right tests, getting the right procedures. And we weren't looking at, well, how do you bill for that, or how do you make sure they're taken care of, and are we following, you know, the true economic traditions you need to make the place work, like my father did. And he was watching that very carefully, because that was his mindset. It became a struggle to get any of the doctors to understand the numbers game that it requires to make that work. And Mark fit that bill perfectly.
This is in fact true, but it's also a great metaphor. After my father died, very shortly thereafter, Mother was giving some personal effects of my father's to my brothers. And she gave Mark my dad's shoes. Same size. I think that's beautiful. And she said, I want you to have these. He said, Mom, I don't know if I can wear them because I don't know that I can feel them. And she said, wear them, it'll happen. And it did, it has.
I would have to say that was probably the time where the brothers cemented, you know, it was kind of you looking across the table going, okay.
I think my dad's misgivings when he died was, you guys are too stupid to keep this place going, you know, it ain't gonna work. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, we're good physicians, but like business-wise, it's like, yeah, ain't gonna happen, you know, but obviously we weren't concerned, because I think all of us as a group, my brothers, including my brother Larry and Mark, all of us as a bunch combined had my dad's strength. None of us had it alone. And we were able to put that together and make it work. And And I think that's why we're successful. I think my dad was thinking, who's going to run the ship? He looked at me and goes, I don't think so. He looked at Matt and goes, you know, it's like, so I think he figured it was dead in the water. And I think he died, unfortunately, thinking that, you know, but we tried to convince him, no, it's okay. That's where it went. I don't think during that whole transition phase there was ever any doubt it was going to be successful. The doubt was what will happen when Dad's gone, because he was the brains of the outfit.
Till the very end.
Till the very end.
Okay.
He knew we needed something, and he just couldn't figure out how we could work that in with what we had here. And after he had it all planned out, well, then he died. But what was beautiful is they broke ground as a funeral procession went by the hospital. They broke ground for the wellness center. Oh my God, if they had the contractors, everybody out there like, here you go, Dr. Rossi, we got it done anyway.
I think the town of Hopedale has allowed us to have this little experiment on how to take care of people. And I think it obviously started with our dad. It just happened to be a place where we could make this thing go and give it a shot and see what would happen. As Mom points out, at 93 years old, this town isn't really just about someone who's ill going to the hospital. It's about this whole wellness concept. Like she said, people care to live longer, healthier lives. How do they do that? Well, they love the concept of walking up and down the street, going to the pond, the railroad pond down there, walking their dogs, staying healthy, so to speak. This allows that little environment where they can do that. And then you have that little healthcare facility that's right next door, just in case there's something wrong. But you promote this whole health and wellness idea like Dad thought about with the wellness center. So the whole idea about people in her age group going to a facility like that, striving to live the best life they can as long as they can, healthy, being proud that they're over there lifting weights and working at the pool and gym and really taking pride in who they are at age 80 or 90. That's beautiful.
Our model is not a new model. It's the old model. It was always patient first, and once you do that, everything else will take care of itself. Once the stimulus started here, to upgrade all the facilities, the ICUs are just unbelievable with the monitor equipment they have, the OR, some of the best angio equipment, the best instrumentation and laparoscopic equipment. You would be surprised to not see this at any one of the largest institutions in the United States.
Patients here aren't a room number. They love coming here and they won't go anywhere else, even if they have to drive. We have some patients that drive an hour and a half to come see their doctor here.
There's probably a misconception in the world that you have to go to a huge hospital to get good care.
Even though we're a small hospital, they keep up with all the new equipment, all the new trends.
Trying very hard to be competitive with the big hospitals. The best technology, you know, the most modern medical equipment that you can have, we can have that out here.
We do gastrectomies all the time. We take gallbladders out. We do common bile duct explorations. We resect pieces of people's pancreases, and we can sew with very fine suture with loops if we need to. And
the facility they run here is first class. The medical care that they provide to our rural area, particularly Tazewell County, is absolutely amazing.
I was really surprised. Hopedale is not a very large city. Their lab people and their technicians and like in the vascular area are wonderful here. That they spend the time with you, they're friendly, and they have been very successful for me. I've had 3 vascular procedures in here in 3 years, and all of them have gone very, very well.
You think you can hold your breath one more time for us?
My son was a patient here, and I felt comfortable. I knew he was taken care of here. They were looking at him as a person and not just this number or not just this disease process.
If you have a problem, he doesn't ignore anything, you know, the tiniest things, he'll get to the bottom of it.
Because healthcare is so streamlined now, it's all about efficiency.
It's all about getting the most done in the shortest amount of time. And so it's just really causing all these communication errors, and with the whole electronic health records, that's bringing a whole line of problems. And so all these problems are coming along where in Hopedale they aren't happening because they have that whole rural setting where the doctors are there from the beginning to the end.
My family's very, very passionate about medicine, and a lot of people are, but their passion kind of pushes them forward to do all these subspecialties and, you know, get this really fine craft down. But, you know, my uncles and my dad, their passion really is to kind of keep the town together and to take care of everyone in as many different aspects as they can.
The fact that Al and Matt and Phil were trained in an era where family and patient care were at forefront, you know, and then you learned how to be a surgeon. The education has changed.
I'm just going to give you a hunch with the grandchildren coming up. There is no natural heir apparent. You know, as far as my retirement, I'm not in a hurry to retire right now, but I'm absolutely looking now to see how this might work.
It's so different now with the grandkids because they all know the big medicine. They all know big hospitals.
I believe that I see in the hearts of my nieces and nephews and in my children loving Hopedale, wanting to be near Hopedale. So the question remains, was this just a lovely experiment? Is it over?
Every time we come back home, at least 2 or 3 people ask us, so you gonna come back to Hopedale? Like, yeah. And you know, it's always like, yeah, that's really far away for me because after med school I have at least, you know, 3 or 4 years of training at least. So I'm still at least 7 years out from ever even having the option to return.
What's the next plan, or you just trust that your dad's legacy will continue somehow? Once the brothers retire, grandkids take over, they'll find replacements.
Oh gosh, we've all given this so much thought because it's so important that we carry on, and it would sure be nice if it could be family, but we're all getting older.
So the succession plan is we have to have people that are committed to this mentality, to this kind of model. That's the succession plan. And I would love it to be family. I would love to have the Rossi guys come back, but you know, some of these guys are in profession or in specialties that may make it a little more difficult for them to make this make a transition to this place.
None of us, my brothers and myself, would ever tell our children when they first started medical school and got through their residency that they had to come back here, first and foremost. They have to have a desire to do something that makes sense when they come to a small community. You have to have that connection to do it.
They got to be wanting to do this. And so they don't have to do it to the level that we do. And I think that's what scares some of them off a little bit, for sure. And I don't blame them. So what's that about? You know, really, is that really worth putting 14, 16-hour days? What are you guys doing?
Something continues to bring me back. I mean, I could be working up there, but working with the family is, it's stressful. It's a stressful situation because you never want to make a mistake. You don't want to make a mistake when you're working with the family. It just because I just don't want to do that. I think the pressure is more than if you're working at some organization where you're like, you can get lost in them. But here you don't get lost.
That as long as there is a physician who's at the top, then the administrator, whether it's a COO president like myself or a vice president or whatever, my feeling is if that's not a Rossi, it has to be someone who very much thinks like the Rossis do and is very, very focused on making certain that we never lose the physician-directed portion of our operation, which is actually in our mission statement.
Getting the right people in the right places is key for a hospital, especially getting people there that want to stay there for an extended period of time and aren't just looking at it as a stepping stone to something bigger.
The environment has gotten so toxic and so difficult for especially a young physician to start a practice. The crushing paperwork, the regulations, the threats of penalties and fines, and all these things coming out of barrage every day that they think, how could I ever do that? I have to sign up and be an employee for a big hospital. I can't do all that.
young kid, she's like 20, 21, had all sorts of complications.
Yeah.
That was 2 years ago. I said, yeah, you need this done. But she's on some insurance through her daddy, just tooling her to death about this and that, and making her do this, making her do that, with this dumb policy. And she had to lose 30 or 50 pounds, and she'd do that, and then they do this, and then she had to go to a center that was designated under the Blue Cross plan, as it all finally turned out. And that wasn't Peoria, it was some guy up in Chicago. One guy in some hospital in Chicago that they would allow her to go see. So she goes to see him. See, I can do it for you, but it's going to be a gastric bypass. She said, I don't want a gastric bypass. She said, well, I don't do anything else. So we don't do that. That's not what you want. But now they're making her go through the whole thing again. Got to go 6 months. I said, you are kidding me. That's making you do that again? Yeah, they said that I have to go through the whole process because it's a different doctor. You are really getting tooled on this. I said, you keep badgering them and badgering them.
The insurance companies hold the cards, and the government holds the cards, and they're saying, we will only pay you if you do this. And they're telling their patients, you will only get remunerated if you do what we tell you. It has nothing to do with what your doctor wants sometimes. Or even you get to see the doctor you want to see.
This is usually my favorite time in the morning because it's actually my favorite time of the year because the vast majority of the time I go to work, it's dark. In the middle of summer, it's actually daylight. And the wildlife are usually just waking up. And if you go to work early before the other cars are running the roads down here, that's when you see the wildlife. So you have to watch for the deer and the raccoons and the turkeys, the pheasant. The other best thing about being out this time in the morning is the sun comes in at a really low angle and you get the coolest shadows on stuff. I always think if I was a photographer, that's when I would go out right at dawn and do like photography because it's so beautiful.
Can you tell us a little bit about today?
Yeah, but being a rural surgeon, you don't do large numbers of one type of procedure like you might if you were a surgeon in the city. You might just do all gallbladders or do all pancreas surgery or all stomach surgery. We do the whole run of the gamut. So it requires a little more preparation, I think, but I don't mind that. I think that's why I enjoy general surgery more every year I do it, is I sort of appreciate the challenge, and it really is an honor that people would let you violate their tissue planes in their body and trust you to put everything back the way it's supposed to be. And I try to instill that on my medical students and residents when I talk to them. If you're not careful, especially when you're busy in training, you can take a lot of things for granted and you forget the gravity of what you're doing. All right, so he's going to be in for the duration on the therapy then. Okay, all right. Sorry to interrupt. Thank you. Yep. I've got our film crew with us from the other day. Are you okay if they come in the room while we talk? Okay. What excites me about going to work every day is, as corny as this sounds, is interacting with my patients. And it's also the thing, not only does it excite me, but it makes me think positively. You want to be an Uber doc, be a surgeon that knows internal medicine. It's a natural transition. I think when you start to pay attention to the medical problems of your patients and you read about how to manage those problems and you experience them every day and help your patients through there, it makes you hands down a better surgeon. It makes you the complete physician.
This is not about the Rossi family, it's about the organization, the nonprofit, the hospital, the foundation.
Yes, they are looking for new, younger physicians to come to Hopedale.
I mean, I'm looking back and going, gee whiz, it's been a great ride, but looking forward, there's a lot to be had here, and not just here, but all over the country. There's a place in the rural setting for a lot of people, including anesthesiologists, nephrologists, all kinds of people. You have to be able to work outside of your specialty, and you have to want to work outside of your specialty and take care of your patients. And that's where the passion is.
I think you have a lot of wonderful, compassionate physicians out there.
We've drifted so far away from that in this nation, and look back and say,
we should never have drifted away from it. We need to go back to that. We need to go back to that model where the patient has a physician who cares for them and is there for thick and thin, and get rid of all the other models where you have corporate structure with all sorts of people and all sorts of doctors and mid-levels whose names the patient doesn't even know, and they walk through a door and there's someone there to care for them. That my hope is that this model would set an example that this still works. And not only does it works well, and the patients love it, and the outcomes are great.
Our children that are currently in medicine are going to get disillusioned when they get out there in the real world and see what they're fighting and what's up. And if they always can come back here and see how it can be run efficiently and best by always putting your patients first, always taking care of things the way you want to do it, rather than having some administrator or some white coat person coming over and dictating to you. I mean, it'll be enlightening to all of our children to understand how this happens. And if they get to the point, which I think some of them will, that they're frustrated with the way medicine is heading, I think this is going to be the diamond in the rough, the area for them to see that, hey, they got it right. I think I can do better there, and I think I can bring a practice here and make it work. And I believe that will happen, whether it's for anesthesia, whether it's for family medicine, hopefully for surgery, for whatever reasons. I think they're going to find out that this is really what it should be like, and it's not just because of my father's or their grandfather's way. It's because it's the way that they see it, the best way to take care of their patients.
You know, bring them back, like Matt said. Let's bring them back. Let's do this again and get back to your roots and not just fragment this whole career. Like, you know, gee whiz, come on, train like it, act like it, do it. You know, don't fall off this wagon into some subspecialty and never use your skills.
The Hopedale Medical Complex began in 1955 with construction of a little 20-bed rural hospital. And from that time, we have added buildings and added to our facility to the extent that now we have a number of things. We're located in a rural area, but we have about 25,000 people in 8 small villages that utilize the facility. And we have received referrals from 26 different states.